The question arrived on a quiet night when the house finally slept, when the hallway light hummed and the past pressed hardest against the ribs. For Aaron Whitmore, a widowed single father in the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Iowa, nights were the loudest hours of the day. He lay awake counting breaths, measuring grief in inches between the door to his daughter's room and his own. Love had once lived here boldly, and after it left, the space it abandoned felt larger than any room. It was on one of those nights, heavy, uncertain, and aching, that a simple, vulnerable question shifted the weight of his world and dared him to imagine warmth where there had only been endurance. Before the story pulls you further, take a moment, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that broken people can still build beautiful lives. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Aaron had not planned on opening himself to anyone again. Since the accident that took his wife Margaret 3 years earlier, life had become a careful choreography of responsibilities. Mornings meant lunches packed and shoes found. Evenings meant homework checked and stories read to his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. He worked as a facilities supervisor at a regional hospital, a job that paid steadily and demanded everything he had left. His circle shrank to school drop-offs, grocery aisles, and a church pew on Sundays where he sat near the aisle in case Sophie grew restless. He wore his fatherhood like armor, strong and necessary, and hid the bruises beneath. The change came slowly, almost invisibly, the way spring creeps into a frozen place. Her name was Rebecca Nolan, a traveling pediatric nurse assigned to the hospital for 6 months. She had grown up in Georgia, spoke with a softness that steadied rooms, and carried herself with a calm that suggested storms weathered and survived. Their first exchanges were brief and practical, nods in hallways, schedules aligned by chance. Over time, practical became familiar. Familiar became comforting. Rebecca noticed how Aaron stayed late to fix things no one asked him to fix. Aaron noticed how Rebecca knelt to Sophie's level when they crossed paths in the cafeteria, how she remembered the little girl's favorite apple slices without being reminded. The challenge was not attraction, it was fear. Aaron feared the betrayal of happiness after loss, feared that joy would dishonor the memory he guarded so fiercely. He feared that letting someone close would confuse his daughter, who still kept a picture of her mother by the bed. Rebecca carried her own hesitations. She had loved deeply once and learned how abruptly the ground could vanish. She had chosen movement over roots, contracts over commitments, because leaving first hurt less than being left. They did not rush. Weeks turned into shared coffee breaks, then into Saturday afternoons at the community park where Sophie learned to ride her bike while Rebecca clapped from the shade. The world widened a little each time. Aaron struggled with the guilt that followed those moments, the sense that smiling too fully was a kind of forgetting. At night, when Sophie slept, he would sit at the kitchen table and rehearse reasons to remain exactly as he was. Stability mattered, safety mattered. Love, he told himself, was a luxury for people without scars. The evening everything crystallized arrived after a late shift. Rain fell thin and persistent, tapping on windows like a reminder. Rebecca had stopped by with a casserole she claimed was too much for one person. They ate quietly while Sophie colored at the table, the house warmer than it had been in years. When Sophie went to bed, the quiet stretched. The past leaned in. Rebecca looked around at the family photos still in their frames, at the spaces where life had been carefully preserved rather than replaced. She did not ask for explanations. She asked for honesty, the kind that risks refusal. The question was not crude or casual. It was tender, almost shy, and it carried the weight of choice. It asked whether there was room in a life already full of duty and memory. Aaron's answer did not erase his fear, but it named his truth. He admitted that there was space, but only if it was shared with intention, patience, and respect, for Sophie, for Margaret's memory, and for the fragile future forming between them. In that moment, love did not rush in like a storm. It arrived like a lamp switched on, revealing a path that had been there all along. The weeks that followed tested that resolve. Sophie struggled with loyalty, worried that loving Rebecca meant losing her mother again. Aaron navigated those conversations with care, affirming that love multiplies rather than replaces. Rebecca learned the rhythms of the household, the bedtime routines, the quiet tears that came without warning. She learned to step back when grief needed space and step forward when courage wavered. Together, they learned that building something new required honoring what came before. One Sunday, they attended church together and sat in the same pew. The sermon spoke about restoration not as repair but as renewal, a making new that carries the marks of what was. Aaron felt the truth of it settle in his chest. Afterward, at a diner off the highway, Sophie laughed freely, a sound that startled Aaron with its brightness. He realized then that happiness had not betrayed him. It had waited patiently for permission. When Rebecca's contract neared its end, the old patterns threatened to return. Distance had always been her escape hatch. Commitment demanded stillness. Aaron faced the possibility of loss again, not as a certainty but as a risk. He chose to risk it. They talked late into the night, not in promises but in plans, not in guarantees but in hope. Rebecca accepted a permanent position at the hospital. Roots, it turned out, could be grown deliberately. Life did not transform into perfection. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, anniversaries that reopened wounds. There were nights when Aaron stared at the ceiling and felt the familiar ache. But now there was also warmth, a presence that did not compete with memory but stood beside it. Sophie began leaving drawings on Rebecca's nightstand. The house learned new sounds. Laughter found corners it had forgotten. If this story is touching something in you, if you've known loss, or love that arrived late, or the courage it takes to say yes when fear is loud, please pause near the end and engage with the video. Like it, share it, and let us know it reached you. Your engagement tells us these stories matter. As the seasons turned, Aaron understood that the question that had changed everything was never really about a bed or a room. It was about whether a heart could stretch without tearing. It was about choosing presence over protection, hope over habit. He had answered honestly, and honesty had given him a life fuller than the one he had been surviving. Before the ending, here's a special request. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story resonated with you most, or share a moment when you chose hope over fear. In the end, the house in Cedar Falls did not forget its past. It learned to live with it. Aaron tucked Sophie in one night and paused at the door, listening to the soft certainty of her sleep. Down the hall, Rebecca waited with a book and a smile that felt like home. The space between rooms no longer measured grief, it measured gratitude. And in that quiet, ordinary miracle, a single father discovered that love, when chosen with care, makes room for everyone.